Ladies and gentlemen, we have three speakers for you in our first session this morning, and we'll be talking about a couple of issues relating to digitalization. From one particular aspect, our first speaker will be telling us about how to raise awareness on new technologies. Jeff Dunlap is the SEVP of Power and Gas at Siemens, Middle East. Jeff.
All right, well, thank you very much for having us, and thank you for inviting us to this. It's really been enjoyable these last well, I was just here yesterday, but yes, I am the head of Power and Gas. I have from Morocco to Pakistan. And at Siemens, we spend a lot of time thinking about the future. And there's a lot of power that needs to come for the future, and there's many ways to bring that. But we talked the other day, there's still 1 billion people in the world without power. There's emerging markets, there's industrialization going on in different countries. And of course, then you have places like Pakistan where you have a good, vibrant economy and a growth plan. So bringing power isn't really such a problem because we've done it for centuries. Well, yeah, centuries. We've done it for a long time, right? But the key is to bring power in a sustainable way, right? So we know the portfolio is going to mix. We know there's going to be a change. We had some good conversations last night about off-grid solar solutions, and that'll be an important role. But we're also going to talk about, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the infrastructure and the normal side of power, and then how digitalization is going to play into that. So if we look at an example, let's just take Egypt, for example. So Egypt came to Siemens and said, listen, I need power. I need a lot of power, like 50% more power than I had before, and I need it very fast. So we sat down with them and we said, all right, you got gas, you got wind, let's do a mix of gas turbines, high-efficient gas turbines, and wind power. We brought our latest technology, the H engine. That's just, H stands for an efficiency class. And you might remember that Siemens was the first to pass 60% efficiency back in 2011. So 6 years ago now, we exceeded the 60% efficiency mark. We've since then been up to 61.5. We're on a path to 63. I've seen R&D plans to 65, and they tell me within my lifetime we should get to 70% efficient. Now, I don't know how many engineers we have in the room, so I'll try. I think I have a very mixed audience. So gas turbines are just like jet engines that sit on the airplane, and they spit heat out the back. You take that heat, you boil the water, and you run a steam turbine, and that's called combined cycle. So those gas turbines are maybe around 35 to low 40s of efficiency. And so with combined cycle technology, you take that up into the 60s. Now, we decided to do 3 power plants for the gas side, 4.8 gigawatts per power plant. To give you a reference, the country of Libya uses about 3 gigawatts of power total. And so each one of these power plants is enough to power 1.5 times the amount of power necessary for the entire country of Libya. So these are big plants, and it had to happen fast. And within 18 months of the start, 18 months of when we signed, we then had the first 4.8 gigawatts online. This will now continue out, and we'll get the full 14.4 gigawatts worth of power by the year by mid next year. So just to give you a feel for what it takes to do one of these infrastructure projects, we're talking about 20,000 workers. We're talking about 3.7 billion man-hours a month. We're talking about shipping equipment and just the tonnage is 24 cruise ships, the big luxury ones that you go on vacation. 24 of those is what it weighs, is just all the equipment that had to be moved in. So, there's only a few companies in the world that can pull something like this off, and I have to say I'm very proud to be part of one of those companies that's capable of this. But this type of power, and then if we talk sustainability, which is what's so important, then you have to have people that can operate and maintain and sustain the assets. So we're training 600 engineers in this activity also. So we'll bring jobs to the region and things. So we like to do these large government-to-government activities because we're one of the few people that can do these effectively. But this kind of technology you probably know about, and it's maybe something that's a bit standard. So if we look, I thought today I'd talk about some things. You know, we're a technology company, and we solve everything with technology. And we're a bunch of engineers, and we all sit around and say, okay, how do we solve this one, right? So if you look at the next thing to try to have sustainable power, we look at the water. And if you look at water, you use it for all kinds of things when you're making power generation. But when you don't have natural gas and you have to use liquid gas, then historically you've had to take water and add it to the process to keep the emissions down to a reasonable level. You know, we don't want to kill the air with all this power, right? So we've now in our burner rigs been able to figure out how to run with zero water and still use liquid fuel. So if you're in a remote area that has to use a liquid fuel, or that just happens to be the fuel you have available, you can still have a substantial product and you can stay within World Bank standards without any water usage. Now, you know what that means for a typical plant, you know, for a typical gas turbine, it's about 16 Olympic swimming pool sizes of water a year. And if you take that, and that's about 150,000 euro, because you know, water is not like it used to be. I mean, Pakistan has lots of water, but we're past the days when you can just scoop a cup out of the river and drink it, right? I mean, you have to process it and work with it. So the last thing you want to do is run it through a power plant, right? You want to use it for important things. This also means you need less capital costs, so you're 1.5 million euro in capital cost because you don't need the tanks and all these things. So again, people didn't really worry about water so much in the past, but we now focus more and more and more on these things. Again, we talked about the heat coming out of the back of a gas turbine and boiling water. It's called a HRSG, right? A heat recovery steam generation. And it's about a 5-story building that has filled with pipes and tubes of water. And you bring the heat through there and you heat the water up. Well, that cycle, there's a loss of water during that cycle. Again, when you start it up and when you shut it down, then it dumps a bunch of water. And then also during operation, there's leakage into drains and things. And again, everybody just kind of ignored this stuff. It was like, oh, who cares? But now we care. And so we've created a system called the water minimizer, and we've gone in and in a 6-year payback, you can get a system that captures 90% of this water and uses every bit of it. You know, uses this 90% to stay in the system. So again, you have a good economic payback, and you don't waste your resources. Then sometimes you want to save different resources, right? Sometimes you want to save your money and your capital costs. So we historically have to work for the peak demands. You know, you have to have, because electricity is instantaneous. When you need it. So you have to be able to generate power for the peak demands. So you build power plants capable of those levels. Well, it turns out that if you have a little water to use, you can then size the plant down and do what's called wet compression. And this works in all environmental conditions. And then by adding water, what you're doing is increasing the density of the air, and that density creates more power. So you can get 15% more power out of a typical gas turbine, which is in F-class is maybe like 25 megawatts. So again, you don't have to build such a big plant because maybe you only need that peak power for a certain period of time, right? So now this is an application where you actually are using the water, but you're using it in a more effective way. Now, there's other methods. Let's talk about efficiency. Let's keep down the efficiency path. There's something called trigeneration, right? So if I take just a basic gas turbine, which, like I said, looks just like one sitting on an airplane, and it's about mid-30s to low 40s efficiency, okay? Then you go combined cycle where you boil the water and you get into the 60s, the low 60s now. Then if you take some of that extra steam, you can take additional of the steam off that boiled water, and you can use it in your processing plant. Now you can get into the 70s. And now we've found that we work with absorption coolers, and you can actually use the heat and the steam for cooling instead of heating. So you probably all have a car, maybe you have an air conditioner in your car and your compressor has broken, right, and your air conditioner quit working. Well, that's compression cooling. Well, absorption cooling is a chemical process that provides cooling. So you don't have a compressor like in your car, but you have a chemical process. So this cooling now can be used, so you get, again, some of this heat that can be used for the cooling process. So with trigeneration now, we can get in, we've got an example here of a building facility in Russia, and we're up to 87% efficient. So now you're really getting the value out of your fuel. Now you're really getting the value and using every bit so that you don't have to use so much fuel, you don't have so many fuel costs. So trigeneration tends to work in applications that are not off-grid but side-grid, and maybe an airport where you have backup power anyway because of safety requirements. You'll have a backup power station. So you'll have a small, so these are the small gas turbines that Siemens offers. They're up and down the line here, and these small ones tend to fit well into these applications. So we're finding this need for cooling where we say, okay, we'll take a small gas turbine, we'll use it for backup power for emergency, and then we'll take that power, and when we're not using it, we'll cool all the buildings with it, with this absorption cooling. So there's more and more, we're studying these kind of unique situations, these unique setups, so that we can maximize the use of the resources we have, maximize the fuel, and keep the cost to the minimum. But now we talk about digitalization, right? And everybody says, and everybody knows, I think, that digitalization is going to be the game changer. And I have a lot of people and ask me, well, what's digitalization? And there's many, many definitions, but my favorite is, I'm on my way to the golf course. I walk out, I look at my clubs, and I'm going, I don't think I have the right number of golf clubs. I grab my telephone out of my pocket, I push a button, and I said, how many golf clubs can I carry? And a young, beautiful woman says, according to the national golf regulation rules, you're allowed 14 clubs, but you must use them all in the same round, and you can't, and she keeps talking all the rules, okay? I realize I don't have enough clubs. I go down and grab another club, throw it in the bag, and I'm off. So digitalization is having total access to every piece of information that you need, when you need it, where you need it, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, you have that piece of information. So I don't have to carry a rule book around. I don't have to study all this stuff. I just talk to a device, and it tells me all the things. And this gives our leaders and our engineers and our lawyers and doctors and everybody instant access to the information to make the right decisions at the right time. I was meeting a gentleman from Pakistan on a sugar mill, and he calls, he says, I'm on the way to the dinner table, and I realize I don't know really his world. So I pull my phone, I push a button, and I said, how many sugar mills are in Pakistan? And by the time he got to the table, I knew there were 90 sugar mills, there were 48 in Punjab, and so now I could have a more meaningful conversation with the man because this was his industry, this is what he knew, and now just a few simple questions to my telephone, and we had a much more productive communication. So in my mind, this is what digitalization is. And so what we are trying to do, and what Siemens is doing, is very much you use this in the design process, you use this in your manufacturing processes, and then you use it in your operation processes, and you use it in your maintenance scheduling and things. So the idea is to just enable everybody to be as brilliant as the encyclopedia and make all these decisions, many of them automated, many of them taking care of themselves. And Siemens is very, very engaged in this. But what's really, really critical to this whole thing is cybersecurity. Because, I mean, I don't mean to get too philosophical here, but you know, in 11/9, the Berlin Wall came down. and the world opened up, and information began to flow, and everything started going, right? So 11/9, it came down. On 9/11, the Twin Towers came down, and things started to collapse and go back the other direction, right? So if when you open, you expose yourself. It creates wonderful things, but it exposes you, and so you have to control that also. So this is where cybersecurity is going to be one of the key elements, because we all don't want our bank accounts to be hacked into, right? So again, Siemens has recognized this, and one of the major efforts we've worked on now for years in the Munich lab is how do we control this cybersecurity? So with the underlining control of the situation, so you enable everybody, but you keep a control of it. It's called MindSphere, is kind of our database, and I'll show you our operating system. We provide digital services that go along with this package, and then there's Siemens software packages that go along. So in this particular top picture, you'll see there's a picture of a car. That's the new Maserati Ghibli. And the Maserati Ghibli was, Maserati historically has not had high production volume cars, right? So they wanted to break into a market where they had a larger production. So with all Siemens software, they developed and designed the system. They were able to double their manufacturing production, and with 30% cost reduction. So again, using the tools of digitalization, they were able to create a process line to create this car. And I don't know if you've driven the Ghibli yet, but it's really nice. My wife's dying for one. She's really twisting my arm. But it's amazing what they've accomplished. So again, this is just part of these tools and packages of enabling the engineers and enabling the people. It kind of looks like this. If you take my golf example, the bottom is the golf rule book, okay? So it's something that you're feeding in. Now, these might be a power plant, it might be an encyclopedia, it might be, you know, any of these things. They come up through, and again, through secure networks, they come into this MindSphere, which is like the global cloud where the data is all at. And in this cloud is where everything floats around and all the information is, which needs to be protected so carefully. And then on top is the application. That's my phone. I talked to my phone, and it reached into the sphere, it found the information, and gave it to me instantaneously. So this is kind of what the architecture looks like, and this is how Siemens is tackling these. So all of these products, so we're working on products on the top, the bottom, and the middle. All our products will be able to talk through this thing, and all of our products will have applications on top. And I wasn't sure this IoT is called Internet of Things, and that was new to me. But apparently Internet of Things is more, again, it's like an open concept, an open architecture concept, where you take things right off the internet, but you control access, and you use these things. Now, how that works for us is we use it in we use it ourselves, we use it in our design process. We use it in my glasses here. We use it, in the automation part in the factories, and then into the maintenance cycles. So again, you can see on the left the portfolio, kind of what we've talked about, and how we use these applications. If you take the right-hand side, then you get into the service model. Now, we have all these gas turbines around the world, and all the data is feeding back to our centers, and again now the intelligence of our engineers is just skyrocketing because of the big data. So they can see small changes in the operation of equipment that they couldn't see before just because they didn't have the data. So we get about 50 gigabytes of data that are coming in, and on a continuous basis, and this has allowed us then to redesign and adjust things. Now again, we talked a lot of automation as part of this whole digitalization. So the wind turbine blades, as the winds shift and the ambient conditions change, then to optimize the efficiency of the turbines, you do small tweaks. We've studied bird wings and feathers and how that all works, and we've found that we can add these like feather-like things to the end of the blade wings, or to the end of the blades, and we get an efficiency improvement and a noise reduction, right? So, you know, if you want to see something done perfectly, take something out of nature, right? There's somebody who knew how to do everything pretty perfect. But so if we now, with all the big data and with all this stuff, we can make so much smarter decisions and so much better designs. And then, of course, the last part of this is the partnering with the customers and getting the business models to work properly and finding the best way for everybody to succeed in these businesses, right? As far as sustainability goes, Siemens takes it very, very personally. And we've set ourselves a personal goal to have a carbon neutral portfolio. So the buildings that we're inhabiting, the cars that we use, everything, there's incentives, there's a drive to drive that Siemens as a company, now we're at, I don't know, 300 and some thousand people around the world, we're in 190 countries, and we're looking to have a net zero carbon footprint. You know, a carbon neutral footprint, I guess. And we've taken it seriously enough that we've hired auditors to torture us and to make sure that we're actually doing what we say we're doing. So what do we think the future looks like? We think there's going to be a lot of people. We think there's going to be, you know, I mean, when we look at the numbers, we say 9.6 billion people, right? That's 7, I think, something like that. And it's just, the expectations are it's going to go up. And so with that, everything we've just talked about. I really should have had my other glasses. Urbanization, that was the word I was looking for. We expect a lot of urbanization. We expect a lot of people in these places, these large megacities. And that's going to take really efficient use. Am I done? Really efficient use of all the things. We talked about digitalization, and we expect globalization to continue. So you'll be seeing these typical with the wind. Maybe a little extra wind power brings in some storage. You can convert it to hydrogen, use that for things. There's many, many things you can do with all of this, and it's going to be a very interesting world. Okay?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Have a seat, Jeff. Before we let you go, let me ask you one question. I mean, you mentioned a couple of things about sustainability there.
Yes.
And Siemens' own corporate carbon footprint is something you've obviously thought a great deal about. But when a government like Egypt or Pakistan comes to you and says, we have power needs,
yes,
how much of your product range are you opening up to this stuff? I mean, if Pakistan says to you, we want power, but we want also to have a solar component, a sustainability component built into the plan, are you seeing that happening more often? And what sort of conversations do you have about that within Siemens?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's a portfolio discussion, right? It's a balance and a flexibility discussion. So, of course, we have our gas turbines, we have our wind turbines. We're in solar specifically ourselves, but we have partners in solar, right? So we also, and even in the Egypt deal, the construction, we have good partners. So it's the discussion that we have at these high levels is, what are we trying to achieve, and what's the portfolio that gives us that flexibility, that you know, best optimized model, that financial model? You know, what is it that's your specific problem?
How often is that conversation coming up?
Well, like every discussion.
Fantastic. Jeff Dunlap.
Almost every discussion.
Thank you very much.